Charles also said his car was worse today than it was yesterday, but from your point of view specifically, what would you like from the car now that you can tell the team about? And if it's a list of things, can you prioritise it for us so we can understand what you're dealing with?
I'll be here all day.
You don't have to give us the whole list,
yeah,
but
I'll be here all day.
What's at the top for you, and what could happen soon?
Well, I mean, we started from the pit lane because we wanted to explore and make some changes. They had some things they found on the simulator last night, so we implemented those changes, and yeah, the car was really in the wrong direction and very, very difficult for whatever reason, clearly for both of us.
Lewis Hamilton has just lived one of the most painful sprint races of his Ferrari career, and the leaked internal report has left Frederic Vasseur furious at how a single setup decision destroyed Hamilton's entire Qatar weekend. The analysis shows Hamilton finished 17th, more than 46 seconds behind Oscar Piastri after starting from the pit lane because Ferrari broke park firm with a desperate overnight rebuild of the SF25. The radio messages reveal a driver who has gone from frustration to full resignation as he told the team the car will not go any faster and later answer questions with single-word sarcasm. Before we break down the full scale of Ferrari's disaster, make sure you subscribe right now because Qatar has exposed one of the most alarming failures of Hamilton's entire 25 season. The Qatar sprint confirmed in brutal fashion that Hamilton's weekend has fallen apart from the very beginning. His 18th place in sprint qualifying forced Ferrari into a radical overnight decision. The internal report shows they abandoned the high downforce configuration he chose on Friday because the SF25 remained unstable in fast corners while carrying far too much drag on the straights. Ferrari switched to a low downforce wing specification and adjusted suspension stiffness in an attempt to correct chronic understeer in Sector 2. These changes immediately broke park firm regulations, sending Hamilton to start from the pit lane. Ferrari knew the sprint could not be won from that position, so they repurposed the race into a live test session. The priority shifted from scoring points to collecting real-world data for Sunday, but the gamble exposed how far behind Ferrari are in understanding the behavior of the SF25 in medium and high-speed corners. Hamilton had open track ahead of him for several laps, but still lacked the rhythm to match the pace of the midfield runners. The leaked analysis of race pace is even more concerning. Despite running in clean air at the start, Hamilton could not get anywhere near the performance window of the front group. The SF25 remained one of the slowest cars in the grid through the 150 to 200 km/h corners according to GPS comparisons. That weakness prevented him from generating the minimum speed needed to build momentum down the straights, and even with the new setup, he lost time rapidly to every car ahead. Hamilton eventually overtook a few cars that had also started from the pit lane, but never posed a threat to the midfield pack led by Williams and Haas. His race stabilized in 17th place, where he finished more than 46 seconds behind Piastri. Ferrari engineers describe the sprint as a controlled test rather than a competitive event, a sign of how desperate the team has become. Even so, the adjustments produced a car that was only marginally more predictable, but still far from competitive. The radio communications reflect a driver who has reached the limit of frustration. On Friday, after being eliminated in SQ1, Hamilton told the team the car will not go any faster. This was not anger, but resignation. During the sprint, the radio was almost silent, filled only with short operational messages. The absence of emotion was more telling than any complaint. It revealed a driver who no longer expects performance improvements from the SF25 because the baseline of the car remains fundamentally weak in the areas demanded by Lusail. Vasseur's frustration grew after comparing Hamilton to Charles Leclerc. Leclerc started 9th, but fell to 13th after running wide in Turn 2 and spending the entire race trapped in a DRS train, unable to pass cars with slower machinery. This comparison confirms that the Ferrari is simply not suited to this circuit. It lacks top speed to complete overtakes and lacks corner stability to pressure rivals. The sprint revealed that both drivers are victims of a flawed chassis rather than individual mistakes. The final layer of the Qatar disaster comes from the implications for Sunday. The sprint provided data that improves Hamilton's setup but does not change the reality that the SF25 is the 6th or 7th fastest car in Qatar. Ferrari now hopes for a chaotic race or multiple safety cars to bring Hamilton into the points. Without external circumstances, the team admits that scoring even 1 point would be beyond the natural pace of the car. Hamilton himself has shifted into a survival mindset, describing the weekend as more of a test session than a competitive opportunity. The central problem for Lewis Hamilton in Qatar is that the Ferrari SF25 never operated within a stable performance window at any moment of the sprint weekend. The leaked internal analysis shows that the high downforce setup chosen on Friday produced severe drag penalties and an unpredictable front end at medium and high speeds. This combination created a car that was slow on the straights, yet still unwilling to rotate through the long corners that define Lusail. Hamilton could not build confidence on entry or momentum on exit, leaving him fundamentally compromised before the sprint even began. Ferrari attempted to escape this trap by switching to a low downforce configuration overnight, but this decision immediately broke park firm regulations. As a result, Hamilton was forced to start from the pit lane, a position that transforms the sprint into a recovery mission rather than a competitive fight. Even with clean air ahead of him, the SF25 refused to respond with the agility Hamilton needed. The car felt marginally freer at top speed, yet remained unbalanced in the key sections where the Ferrari should have gained time. This left Hamilton with no realistic path toward the points. A deeper underlying problem came from the car's behavior in the 150 to 200 km/h corner range. According to the analysis, this speed band exposed the SF25's most damaging weakness. Hamilton was unable to carry minimum speed compared with the midfield cars around him, which meant he lost time before even reaching the straights. Instead of building momentum into the throttle phase, he found himself managing mid-corner rotation and fighting to keep the rear stable. This limitation destroyed any chance of mounting sustained pressure on the pack ahead. The competitive picture became even worse once Hamilton reached traffic. The sprint format does not allow pit strategy to break trains, and the Ferrari lacked the top speed required to complete overtakes without DRS assistance. The internal report shows that even when Hamilton closed the gap at corner entry, he immediately fell back on exit as the SF25 struggled with traction. This left him stuck behind cars with slower baseline pace, but stronger aerodynamic efficiency. The absence of overtaking opportunity turned a race into a static exercise rather than a fight. The radio messages exposed a psychological dimension to the problem. Hamilton's communications were uncharacteristically flat, reduced to short replies, and no emotional engagement. His comment after SQ1 that the car will not go any faster was a rare admission of resignation rather than frustration. By the time he reached the sprint, Hamilton had stopped expecting the SF25 to react to setup changes. This mindset is revealing because it indicates that both driver and engineers recognized the limitations of the car were structural rather than situational. Another major issue comes from the comparison between Hamilton and Charles Leclerc. While Leclerc started ninth, he immediately fell backward after sliding wide at turn 2 and then became locked inside our S train for the remainder of the race. This confirms that the Ferrari does not possess the aerodynamic purity or straight-line efficiency required to recover positions in Qatar. The fact that both drivers suffered similar fates despite opposite starting strategies demonstrates that the root problem is embedded in the DNA of the SF25, not in driver execution. The final problem for Hamilton is the championship and momentum impact. Starting from the pit lane and finishing 17th means Ferrari collected minimal usable data and gained no competitive advantage for Sunday. The team now enters the Grand Prix with a car that remains fundamentally mismatched to the circuit while rivals around them gain confidence. The sprint exposed the gap between Ferrari's expectations and reality, leaving Hamilton's weekend in jeopardy and Vasseur demanding explanations inside the garage. Ferrari's engineering team entered the sprint under relentless pressure because the overnight decision to abandon the original high downforce package meant they were effectively rebuilding the SF25 without the safety net of additional practice. The leaked report confirms that the engineers were forced to make rapid aerodynamic and suspension adjustments based on incomplete data from Friday. The team hoped a lower drag package would unlock straight-line speed and improve rotation. But the risk was enormous because any miscalculation would trap Hamilton in a setup that he would be unable to correct under park firm rules. The pressure to deliver a functional car with only theoretical guidance shaped every choice they made. The switch to a low downforce configuration created a chain reaction of engineering consequences. By fitting a lighter rear wing and altering mechanical stiffness, Ferrari aimed to stabilize the car in high-speed corners, yet this shift changed the balance of the entire aerodynamic platform. The engineers had to anticipate how the floor would respond to reduced rear load and how the front end would behave once the car carried more speed into the braking zones. The internal data shows that although the straight line numbers improved slightly, the chassis still felt disconnected through the fast sequences of Lusail. This left engineers with no way to fine-tune the car further. The need to start from the pit lane became an engineering problem as well. Because Ferrari modified the car outside part firm regulations, they were required to lock in every change without the opportunity to test the setup in real time before the sprint. This meant Hamilton entered the race driving blind with a configuration that had never been validated on track. Engineers could only rely on simulation predictions and the fragmented information from Friday. The sprint then became a live diagnostic session rather than a performance fight, placing pressure on the team to gather maximum data without destabilizing the driver. Another engineering challenge came from the SF25's behavior in the mid-speed range. The report highlights that the car failed to hold minimum corner speed compared with its rivals in the midfield. This forced the engineers to examine whether the platform was too stiff or whether aerodynamic load distribution remained inconsistent as lateral forces increased. Ferrari discovered that even with the reduced wing level, the car lacked the mechanical grip needed to support the aero structure. This mismatch left the engineers without a direct solution because correcting mechanical deficiencies while preserving aerodynamic balance is not achievable during a sprint weekend. The radio messages from Hamilton added more pressure to the engineering team. Unlike previous races where Hamilton actively guided setup adjustments, the sprint communication consisted mostly of short acknowledgements. The silence on the radio reflected not only driver frustration, but also the limited range of options available to the engineers. The team could offer information, but could not make changes. This placed them in a reactive role where the only priority was gathering data for Sunday. The engineers had to analyze Hamilton's lap times, temperatures, and corner traces in real time without asking the driver to push beyond the capabilities of the car. Ferrari also faced pressure from comparing Hamilton's data with Leclerc's performance. Although Leclerc started in a far stronger grid position, he immediately fell backward after a mistake in turn 2 and spent the entire sprint trapped in a DRS train. Engineers realized that even in free air, Hamilton's pace was similar to Leclerc's pace while following slower cars. This confirmed that the SF25 is limited not by driver performance, but by structural design weaknesses. That revelation forces engineers to shift their focus from session optimization toward long-term development concerns, deepening the pressure on a weekend already spiraling out of control.